I'm Jack Lemmon. Someone once said that in nature there are no rewards and no punishments, just consequences. This is a program about pollution and those consequences. Many television critics feel that the public is becoming bored with documentaries that talk about ecological problems, but yawning at pollution, that's like playing mumbly-peg with Jack the Ripper. There is a great failure to understand and appreciate the situation. Now, in 1969, we finally faced up to some black-edge news. We have corrupted our environment to the point where there is some doubt that we can avoid disaster. And a little more than a year ago, we pointed out to you that our environment was beginning to look like it had been mugged. You know, ecological storm warnings were snapping in the wind everywhere. And we're back with you today because now the situation is worse. Not only here, every country in the world, you see. It's important to realize we are linked ecologically with our neighbors. Our environmental responsibility doesn't stop at the county line. And because of this fact, we visited 6 countries of Europe and many cities across America. And what we found scared the daylights out of us. For example, hydrogen sulfide gas has now been found in the deepest parts of the Baltic Sea. Now, the Baltic Sea already had enough chemicals and pesticides in its top layer to start a drugstore. But now, poison fish huddle in the middle and hope somebody will eat them. See, that's their last chance to get even. Our domestic situation is worse. The Cuyahoga River, which throws up into Lake Erie, that's so rancid, there's nothing left that will tolerate it, except people. Even sludge worms, they love filth. They've spit up and cut out. The simple act of drinking tap water, that can be pretty chancy in some parts of our country. Sometimes you look into your glass, you find something looking back at you. In spite of enough evidence to strangle a computer, you know there are still some people who will not believe that pollution can be a killer. Last year, a developer at Lake Arrowhead, California, he denied that smog was laying waste to the Ponderosa Pines at that particular resort. And he threatened to sue NBC if we said so. And we did. That was last year. This year,
we're logging this 1,000 acres of Ponderosa pine, which has been damaged by smog. This has been sold to Big Bear Timber Company. These trees would die as a result of the smog damage anyway, and some of the other problems that exist is the buildup of insects as a result of this smog damage. The smog weakens the trees, and it makes it much more susceptible to insect attack. As these trees are cut out, of course, this is going to leave an open space, and what we're going to do is come back in and plant about 70,000 trees which are more resistant to smog. This would be principally sugar pine and the Sequoia gigantea, which our research people have found are more resistant to smog damage.
while the dead and dying among the great trees are removed, forestry scientists are continuing the search for an answer, any answer. Plant pathologist Dr. Paul Miller isn't wildly optimistic.
We have no method by which we can protect or restore the health of the trees, any method which we can apply as a chemical, except for one thing. We can put trees in filtered air, and we have done this to a limited extent to prove that trees in filtered air will recover. We found, for example, that during May and June up here, the air pollution levels normally exceed those in the valley area. And May and June are those months when the trees grow the most. That is, this is their growth period. So the air pollution inhibits growth, and this is one of the keys to the decline of the trees that we have observed here. This ponderosa pine is about 125 years old. It has just been cut down because it was dying slowly from damage by smog. As the tree dies, it becomes attractive to bark beetles, and they move in, making their home just inside the bark, where they chew away the tissue which connects the leaves to the roots in the bottom, thereby disrupting the flow of nutrients. The tree then is killed.
Despite its reputation for smog, Los Angeles has the cleanest industrial base in the world. To get that way, the county had to file more than 40,000 criminal suits. It won over 90% of them. The lesson of Los Angeles has been lost on most other big cities, such as New York, Cleveland, and Chicago. Producer Don Widener asked former Los Angeles smog chief Louis Fuller why.
I don't think that you had the force of action necessary to bring the criminal action to bear. This is something that you have to have. You've got to get the hard-nosed enforcement in order to make your point. I think that there is an unawareness on the part of officials nationwide of just what the seriousness of our problem really is. I don't think they understand it, but they better understand it soon.
What do you think is going to happen if they don't understand it?
It's like trying to stop a vehicle at high speed. You see the emergency, you slam on your brakes, but you don't stop. You continue to skid for quite a distance, and that's what we're doing now. If the brakes are applied firmly and immediately, then I think there is still a possibility that we may reverse the trend that we're in right now. But it has to be done without delay. But if those government officials responsible for doing it haven't got the guts to do it, then they better get out of the way and let somebody get in who can do the job, because it's got to be done.
During the past few months, we have seen a gratifying but long overdue interest in reducing the lead content in our gasoline. This action follows along behind scientific reports that the concentration of lead in our air and water and soil has grown to alarming proportions. Dr. Claire Patterson at the California Institute of Technology is one of the world's leading authorities on lead contamination of the environment.
Dr. Chow of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography and myself here at Caltech have looked at lead in samples of soil and air and water and snow and ice all over the world. The concentration of lead here in MacArthur Park, which is well over 3,000 parts per million in the upper soil, it can be compared to only 19 parts per million in the soil in Moscow. Now, Moscow, they don't use lead in their gasolines, and here in Los Angeles, we do. Lead is the oldest environmental poison known to man. Our troubles with lead began more than 4,000 years ago when man first began to mine lead ores to get the silver out of it, and it's been with us ever since. The Romans, for example, mined and used lead at a per capita rate which is the same as we mine and use lead today in the United States. Some scientists feel that lead poisoning may have contributed to the downfall of the Roman Empire. Now, this lead miasma from the industry, which permeates our atmosphere, our soil, and our bodies, is detrimental to our health. Of course, the Ethyl Corporation doesn't believe this, and we have been arguing and fighting on this problem for about 5 years now. Lead is a heavy metal enzyme poisoner. It inhibits the biochemical processes within the cells throughout our body, and in different degrees depending upon how much lead contamination we're exposed to. And in the cities, we're exposed to such levels that we have in our bodies about 100 times more lead than we would have under natural conditions. And this is only a very small factor from those levels which cause acute lead poisoning.
Last year, producer Widener and KNBC got the help of noted scientist Milton Farber in developing a device to reduce automotive exhaust emissions. Now, this device, which is a new type double-chamber catalyst muffler, offered great promise in its initial tests. And recently, Don talked with Farber about the status of that device today.
Well, as you will remember, when we talked last year, we were involved in a laboratory development program for a dual catalyst system to remove the major air pollutants. Since then, we went ahead and built some prototype hardware. Following that, we started in on a road testing program. We placed our muffler on a small Ford delivery truck, followed by a 1969 Chevrolet station wagon, and more recently on a 1970 Chevrolet pickup with a 307 cubic inch engine and the automatic shift.
We've heard a lot about catalyst mufflers being affected by lead in gasoline. Have you had any problem this way?
Well, we've tested one muffler for about 12,000 miles, and we've tested a 1969 Chevrolet to at least 6,000 miles and noticed no adverse effects to those mileages.
Well, have other companies shown an interest in this new muffler that you have?
Yes, the major automobile companies have talked to us, and we are now doing some testing for them on our device.
Milt, does this muffler meet the new vehicle exhaust emission standards in California?
Yes, it meets the current California requirements for all three pollutants and exceeds the 1975 requirements for the nitrogen oxides. That's the brown stuff.
Well, what does this mean to the Californian? If these mufflers were on all the cars now, what difference would it make?
Well, at least 80% of the major pollutant would disappear, and we'd have relatively clean air again.
Blue skies.
Yes.
Las Vegas, Nevada, has always rolled economic sevens. As a moneymaker, she's still holding aces. However, her environmental luck is starting to turn, and nobody had that figured. Laboring under green eye shades and false assumptions, Vegas played the game like ecological crapshooters everywhere. She laid heavy odds that the clear desert skies would always be clear. It was a sucker bet. Often these days, the distant hills are cloaked with a carbonic curse, smog. And Nevadans don't like the numbers scientists keep coming up with at beautiful Lake Mead a few miles away. Translated, they tell of building pollution problems. Industrial wastes, sewage, and pesticides are the lake's daily diet. Irv Koenig is one of a team of researchers from the University of Nevada at Las Vegas studying the situation.
We have terrific amounts of phosphates and nitrates pouring into the lake. We have algal buildups, and at the present time, we have a water plant under construction. The city water for Las Vegas will be drawn from Lake Mead in the near future. We've been doing research on pesticides and DDT being dumped into the lake. We had one sample which read as high as 4 parts per billion right in the wash here dumping into the lake. We don't have definite data on the fish yet, but we intend to in the near future. If this continues, it eventually will end up that we'll have a sterile, dead lake here and a very undesirable water supply.
This is the Monterey coast of California. Almost everyone who comes here longs to stay, and many have. And some call it the most beautiful spot on earth. It's a mystic place of fog-shrouded coves, radiant wildflowers, and towering redwoods. It's a beacon to artists, and writers, and nature lovers. But there is one flaw in this paradise: pollution. From Carmel in the south to Santa Cruz on the north, the towns of Monterey Bay feed partly treated sewage into the ocean, and that fouls the coast. And some communities, such as famed Pebble Beach, dispense with formalities, and they pipe their human waste into the bay raw. So the bay has become polluted to the point that one college teacher warns his marine biology students to get typhoid and hepatitis shots before skin diving. Not long ago, most of the beaches had to be closed as health hazards. They opened later, but the problem remains. State water quality authorities are pushing a building ban in some areas until waste discharge standards are met. Ugly as it is, sewage is not the ocean's worst enemy. That black honor belongs to DDT and related long-lasting pesticides. DDT is becoming an economic burden. Among edible shipments that have been confiscated for high DDT content are Michigan coho salmon, Arkansas turkeys, Salinas lettuce, and Pacific mackerel. And because DDT lasts for decades in the ocean without dissolving, the concentration keeps increasing. We may now see the day when major fisheries will collapse. We even know that phytoplankton in the ocean can be affected. And these microscopic plant organisms provide about 70% of our Earth's oxygen supply. One of the many scientists working on the problem is Dr. Donald Abbott, Assistant Director of Hopkins Marine Station in Pacific Grove, California.
This is a model of a molecule of DDT. The black little balls here are atoms of carbon. These are hydrogen atoms, and the yellows are chlorines. The whole thing looks just a little bit like a butterfly with chlorines at the tip of its wings and at the tip of its tail. This is one of a family of chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticides that have been causing a good deal of damage in the world and are spread in the ocean as well.
Dr. Abbott, in your research studies here at Hopkins Marine Station, have you discovered any damage to fish life off the Pacific coast?
We've detected rising DDT levels in a lot of populations in marine organisms. In terms of direct damage to man, I suppose the greatest damage we've suffered so far has been in the jack mackerel fishery. Over the last 10 years, that's been the major fish taken for human consumption off the coast of California, and the catch has dropped drastically simply because the DDT levels are so high that these fish are no longer fit for human consumption.
What about bird life, Doctor? We know the pelican is already in trouble.
The pelican's in trouble, and we've had kills of various other birds, cormorants, grebes, and so on. The pelican used to breed as far north as Point Lobos, right near Monterey, California. Now it's not breeding essentially north of Mexican waters, and if we keep on doing things as we are, we may have no pelican population at all in another decade.
How does DDT affect the pelican?
Well, the most marked effect is it causes the animals to lay eggs, which are very thin shells. The birds sit on their nests, these eggs break. So we have a situation where there's essentially no effective reproduction in the population.
Although it's sad, pollution in Northern California is penny ante compared to the eastern variety. We'll take a look at the hard stuff in a moment as we visit New York, Washington, D.C., and beautiful Ohio. Somehow, most cities of the world have managed to get nearly all the way through the 20th century without being potty trained. In some towns, including some of the wealthiest, they don't treat their sewage at all. They just dump it raw into the nearest body of water and then they stay upwind. And sometimes they put their sewage in at one point, draw the drinking water from another, but it's the same stream. And most sewage is discharged into a local river because that keeps it moving down to the next town. It's known as the good neighbor policy. And of course, the guy in the next town, he seldom yells because he's dumping sewage of his own and shipping it along to you-know-who. The guy at the end gets the whole mess, and sometimes a pox or two along with it. Any serious student of pollution should plan at least one field trip to New York City. In addition to many interesting and colorful side jaunts, there are the famed open sewers of the Hudson River. For variety, aroma, and sheer volume, they're hard to beat. Producer Widener cased the Hudson with two men who know it well, Robert Boyle of Sports Illustrated, who's written a book about the river, and Dr. Manny Sewage.
In the Manhattan area, the Hudson is very badly polluted. All the sewage that goes into the river is raw. There is no treatment of it whatsoever. No treatment whatsoever. Human fecal matter, anything. Into the toilet, down the pipe, and right out here.
That approximately 365 million gallons of raw sewage empties into the New York Harbor complex each day, together with about 1.1 billion gallons of partially or inadequately treated sewage.
This brings up an obvious question. Why haven't they treated this sewage?
No one ever thought to treat it before. People thought that rivers were built to carry away man's waste. Now they're finally talking about doing something. Back in 1965, the voters of this state passed a $1 billion bond issue by a 4-to-1 margin, the biggest in the history of the state on any issue, to clean up the waters of the state. It was to have been done by 1972. It will not be done by 1972, and the talk is now that it's going to cost at least $3 billion. New York City has talked for years about cleaning this up. They have really yet to get on the job.
There has been major closings of major recreational areas in the Lower Bay. The Seagate Beach in Brooklyn, South Beach and Graham Beach on Staten Island are now classified as not approved for swimming during the summertime. These are miles of prime recreational area in a very heavily populated center. And it's a real shame that they're not available to the general public.
You know, the river offers its dangers, especially to people who eat things that are raw out of the river. Several years ago, some young boys fetched a watermelon out of the river near 125th Street, and they ate it, and they came down with typhoid fever. You've worked on the river, Manny. You've worked in Staten Island. Well, what the devil is in this water?
I can substantiate that remark, Don. I and a colleague of mine, Dr. Robert Nuzzi, performed a bacteriological survey off the shores of South Beach, and we did come up with positive indications of the presence of Salmonella typhosis, the typhoid-causing organism, Shigella dysentery bacteria, possibility for Corynebacterium diphtheriae, the causative agent for diphtheria. The coliform count in the waters was extremely high, ranging between 3,000 and 150,000 per 100 ml during winter conditions. The permissible level in recreational waters, for swimming anyway, is 2,400 per 100 ml. So you see there's a wide discrepancy here.
What does this mean to the people? Does it take the river away from them for recreational purposes?
It takes the river away from a lot of people for recreational purposes, but one of the sad things you'll see anglers come here to fish by the sewer outlet. There are still fish passing in and out of the ocean. And one fellow who was fishing here said, well, it's not too bad, but the thing I don't like is the stuff I have to pick off the line.
In the past few years, many of us have taken a new interest in our drinking water. For one thing, it's more colorful. See, in some parts of the country, you can find interesting foaming solutions, and in other parts, it looks like it's been strained through old gym socks. In Washington, D.C. last July, coffee-colored liquid ran from the taps, and it stained clothes, but water officials still said it was safe. It's just a little iron oxide breaking off inside of 100-year-old lines. In fact, they announced that if you believe what you see on TV commercials about iron-poor blood, this stuff might be better for you than clean water. Truth. Dr. Roger Eggerberg, Assistant Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. He says that about 58 million Americans are served by water supplies that are not even covered by the public health standards. And water expert Harold Koenig, President of Ecological Science Corporation, he couldn't agree more.
It's so bad that I personally won't drink water in any community in the United States unless I personally have seen the degree of treatment and am satisfied the skill of the operators in the treatment facility. The potable water in the United States is just unfit for human consumption by and large. It's a rare location that you can be sure of drinking safe water. There are some new developments, some new processes that can remove some of the contaminants, but the best of my knowledge,
no significant municipality have these equipment or processes installed.
There are plenty of smart birds in our nation's capital. The brightest of the lot won't have anything to do with the river water here. And it's easy to see why when you take a cruise down the Anacostia. Sadly, the Anacostia is a pretty ordinary sight. Streams which once ran sweet and clear have now become a national disgrace. They are sluggish monuments to our failure to establish and enforce tough anti-pollution laws. Industries and cities have polluted with impunity for decades, secure in the knowledge that there were few environmental Wyatt Earps. Responding to pressure from an outraged public, the government is beginning to move, however slowly. Because historically, the government has always responded more to heat than to light. The question is, are we moving fast enough and in the right direction? Well, the answer depends on who you ask.
According to all the figures we have at FWPCA, we need $10 billion worth of work on municipal sewage treatment plants and interceptors. If it isn't enough, if we find out as we go along it isn't enough, President Nixon has promised that we'll get more, and he's directed Secretary Hickel to keep making checks.
The proposal to spend $4 billion of federal monies in the next 5 years and $6 billion of municipality monies is a fraction of what is needed. If we're going to preserve the quality in the environment and avert literally a disaster, we're going to have to make the same kind of a commitment in dimensions that we've made to the construction of weapons systems and to the exploration of space. We're talking about a commitment of 25 to 30 or 40 billion dollars a year facing us in the very near future if we intend to survive in any kind of a quality environment.
We need 30 billion for air pollution, we need 60 billion for water pollution, and we need 10 billion for proper sewage treatment plants in our locales, in our districts, and our communities. The present administration, we are fighting for $1.4 billion. We can't possibly do the job.
In Washington today, pollution and the ecological crisis dominate conversation. Throughout the country, there are endless meetings, conferences, and political speeches on the problem. The words are encouraging, but words, as Rudyard Kipling once noted, are the most powerful drug used by mankind. Pollution recognizes no boundary, political or geographic. Rivers meander across states and nations, and the pesticides and other contaminants, they move freely around the globe in the air and water. So all men must share the guilt and the misery of pollution. In this sense, at least, we are one. Our European friends, for instance, they're battling problems often as bad, sometimes worse than our own. They've fallen on evil times. The castles are holding up fine, but the moats have soured. This stately old manor stands a few miles outside London. It shares a common destiny with the ancient English oaks. Both are misty remnants of glories past. Both are slowly fading, victims of progress. The trees are dying from air pollution and old age. The great house seems simply to have passed its time for living. Population growth, the root cause of pollution. More people, more expansion, more waste. Europe already has more humans per acre than any other continent and will add another 200 million in the next 30 years. Even now, visitors to London during any season have a tough time finding quarters. I mean, the last guy who didn't get caught in a traffic jam was on a dragon hunt. England's anti-pollution struggle, like that in most countries, is hampered by political foot-dragging and a shortage of funds. Reporter Alex Hendry of the London Times recently completed a survey of Britain's situation.
We had a team of 4 people working on this for about 2 months. And what we discovered was mainly that there is not enough is being done quickly enough in order to solve the problems that are facing us now. Rivers are our most serious problem because in this country there is not a bountiful supply of water, and therefore it's absolutely essential that all the water that we have be kept as clean as possible so that it can be used again and again. In London, for example, the water which is drunk here has in fact been drunk previously by other people. It's gone through sewage works, cleaned, passed back into the river, and then extracted for London's water supply. One of the problems that we've found is that rivers, for example, the river authorities are run by local authorities. The problem then is money, and there is a cliche in local authority work in this country that there are no votes in sewage, and this seems to be taken as an excuse for not doing very much about the problem.
Thousands of seabirds that died in the Irish Sea last winter were carrying in their bodies a toxic industrial chemical called PCB, polychlorinated biphenyl. PCB, like DDT, is long-lasting, and it concentrates in the tissues of birds and fish and animals. We asked Mr. Hendry how British scientists reacted to the death of the birds.
One of the things that the scientists point out, and I think it's very important, is that it's not simply a matter of bird deaths. They say that these bird deaths, wildlife deaths, should be like the old miner's canary, a warning to the rest of us that something is going seriously wrong within our environment.
One of the concerned scientists is Dr. Robert Clark, pollution authority and professor at the University of Newcastle on Tyne. Producer Widener talked with Dr. Clark in London.
We've got our troubles. I think in many respects not as severe as some of the difficulties you're having.
You're an authority on oil pollution, and we've taken a look at some of it here in Britain. How serious is that?
Well, I think this is our most troublesome problem. The British Channel particularly is one of the most heavily trafficked seas in the world, and a large part of the oil that's coming to Western Europe is coming by sea and coming up through the English Channel and the North Sea, and there's a constant low-level pollution, which is most shores of the country are being fouled up by oil periodically. And then, of course, at the refineries and oil terminals, you have a problem of chronic pollution. And once in a while, unfortunately, you get a Torrey Canyon or a mess of that sort.
Well, that's the visible oil pollution. What about the problem that you can't see?
Well, yeah, this is really what worries me, that in a way, the problems that you know about are not problems, because at least you know what you ought to be doing. But we don't know really anything about the consequences of low-level oil pollution, persistent oil pollution in the sea upon the plankton, productivity of planktonic organisms, things like that. The food chains could be disturbed, but the trouble is all of these effects are obviously subtle. If they weren't subtle, we would know about them by now. We know the obvious things that happen. We don't know about these other things. And it's very difficult to persuade people that if you can't actually see the pollution, that it's not doing any harm. In a way, oil pollution is one of the classic examples where you can see the conspicuous things that are happening, the large-scale pollution, and so all the efforts are made to clean this up. And the tendency is that you forget that it's like sweeping the dust under the carpet. You see, once you've got rid of it, you can't see it anymore, then you think that's the problem solved. And we don't know whether this is true or not. It quite likely isn't.
No place in Europe has escaped the blight of pollution. Some places may be worse than others, but that's just a matter of degree. And even the picture postcard Nordic countries, they painted themselves into an environmental corner. And that's pretty tough for Scandinavians, you know. They've always lived very close to nature. They've used that as a kind of an escape valve against the pressures of population and progress. When they found out a few years ago that many favorite lakes and streams could no longer be used because they were contaminated, the people raised Cain. If pollution could kill the birds and fish, they reasoned it could harm people and their children as well. Life in the congested cities was becoming less tolerable. Fewer residents could enjoy that weekend retreat. They found it not to their liking, so they pressured officials. And today, scientists such as these in Finland have more money, more time to battle the problem. But it's a deadly game of catch-up. Pollution has gained a running head start. Work is pushed winter and summer in all kinds of weather. Compounding the problem, countries in this part of Europe are rapidly destroying their great fishing ground, the Baltic Sea. The Baltic's oxygen level is dropping. The water becomes more saline each year, and the phosphate content has tripled since 1955. The recent discovery of lethal hydrogen sulfide gas in the sea's deepest parts, that brought warnings of an oceanic desert unless the situation is corrected and quick. Poisons pile up because the water exchange cycle between the Baltic and the North Sea is agonizingly slow, 21 years. And to make matters worse, more and bigger oil tankers are cruising the Baltic. Scientists, they're keeping their fingers crossed. They believe a few disasters on the scale of the Torrey Canyon spill could annihilate marine life and fisheries. In Stockholm, Professor Hans Palmstierna, secretary to the Swedish Advisory Committee on Environmental Problems, described the situation for us.
What you're seeing here is one of the very few fishermen left here in this stream, which in reality is the outlet of the big Lake Mälaren upside Stockholm here, where the outlet of Lake Mälaren going out into the Baltic Sea farther down there. He thinks he gets good fish out of it. He's not allowed anymore to sell it. He is just allowed to use it for his own purposes. In many lakes, most of the fish in Sweden was rather poisoned. And that gave quite an uproar, because fish is quite an important food. The fish is poisoned by mercury. It contains around 1 milligram per 2 pounds of mercury. This mercury is poisoning our nerves if we are eating this fish. We have been forced to close down about 40-45 lakes, quite long stretches of the coast outside here, down in South Sweden, etc. And we looked for the sources of this kind of mercury and found that the pulp factories were using mercury when making the pulp for paper production. They are now at the moment finding exactly the same problem in Canada. For example, the birds are dying in Alberta. The fish should really not be eaten from quite a few of the lakes in Canada. And I could tell you, you will find the same problem in the United States if you look into it once also. Since the 1840s, there has been a fight against poverty. We had to bring up the standard of living as fast as feasible. We had to use all kinds of agriculture chemicals, chemicals in the industry, etc. The evolution of all these substances went that fast that we couldn't test them all. And for that reason, all these different substances like DDT, PCB, mercury, cadmium, etc. went out into the waters and came into agriculture, came into our foods, and they are now coming into our bodies via the food, via the air, and they may be destroying our own lives, and they may destroy the lives of our kids in future generations. And that's what we have to fight. It is a matter of life and death of this civilization.
This is Paris. Even here, in this beautiful city, pollution, the fifth horseman, has come riding. The Seine River, like Germany's Rhine and every other major stream in Europe, is contaminated. There are too many people, too many cars, too much everything. Traditional French detachment toward trouble has been a plus in the past. Paris has survived centuries of pestilence and panzers with a wink in a wine bottle. Today, Parisians appear unconcerned about their worsening environment. And that could be another Waterloo. The people of Paris, when we visited them, seemed intent on more compelling matters. Perhaps it's just that we were there in the spring. Whatever, their attention seems focused today where it always has been, on each other. Death Valley. It came by the name honestly. The Funeral Mountains aren't far away. A hard rock miner once compared this land to a dance hall cutie of the day. Beautiful, but damned unaccommodating. Anything that can survive here deserves to. Not many breeds of man or beast have been able to adapt to the furnace-like heat of summer or the barren, salt-encrusted land. However, one that did is the Devil's Hole pupfish. Numbering only 200, they're the only members of their species on Earth. Surviving hasn't been easy for the pupfish. They've had to live in 93-degree water, and only a few inches of it at that. Their home is a small ledge in a spring at the bottom of this cavern. But somehow they've made it for 20,000 years. Their uniqueness has made them a part of the Death Valley National Monument. So take a good look. As far as we can ascertain, this is the only motion picture footage ever taken of the pupfish. Unless there's a miracle, it will be the last. Man is about to murder them. The few inches of water that is their world is being taken away to raise feed, to raise cows in Death Valley. Unfortunately, the fish cannot be successfully transplanted. Taken from their small world, they soon perish. Dr. James Deacon, professor of biology at the University of Nevada, is one of the scientists searching for some means of saving the pupfish.
The population in Devil's Hole fluctuates between about 200 and 700 individuals. The basis for population control is the sun. The sun in the wintertime does not make it down to the water surface. Because of that, the algae upon which the invertebrates that the fish eat depend does not grow well, and the fish population dies back primarily by starvation. During the spring, when the sun reaches the water surface and algae begins to grow, the fish are able to build up population sizes. The pumping in the farming operation that's recently been started in Ash Meadows has resulted in a lowering of water levels, which in turn are lowering the water in Devil's Hole. We anticipate that if the pattern followed last summer is followed again this summer, the water will fall below this shallow shelf and thereby remove feeding and breeding grounds for this species.
We asked Dr. Nelson Williams, botanist and consultant to the Clark County Health District, about the agricultural potential of Death Valley.
The farmers in this area are up against a situation with the salty soil and poor quality of water that it requires an investment of nearly $500 per acre in fertilizer and irrigation costs. The only successful people in this area have sold their land for other purposes. The ones who've tried to make a success of farming have failed. Farming operations can only continue for a limited period of time, say 5 years, before the soil becomes so loaded with salt that operations could not be profitable any longer. You may as well try farming a beach.
The pupfish are an example of how man, given the choice of profit or posterity, seldom chooses the latter. Unless action is taken to stop water withdrawal, the pupfish must die in August or perhaps September. When we saw them, they were spawning. They didn't know, and we didn't let on. Now, during the filming of this documentary, we talked to several scientists and we asked them point blank, do we have the time and the brains to stop pollution before it stops us? To the last man, these particular scientists agreed. We have the time, the money, and the know-how. And then we asked them one more question. Do you believe that we will use these resources and thereby salvage the environment? And here are their answers.
Certainly, if we keep on as we've been going the last generation, we're headed for disaster.
I'm sorry, I am a pessimist in this regard. I feel that mankind will react only when it's too late and catastrophe is upon us.
I believe my child has a shorter life expectancy than I do.
No. I'm 27 years old, and I think I'll live to see the end.
It's easy to call scientific pessimism alarmist or sensationalist. Those who have the vision to see what's coming, more often than not, they're met with disbelief. You know, almost a decade has passed since Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, in which she exposed the dangers of DDT. Well, she was attacked mercilessly by science and industry alike. But history has proven her alarmingly correct. Our failure to listen, that is a mistake, the magnitude of which is still unknown. And the Russians, they're also hard of hearing. In the face of scientific warnings from all over the world, the Soviets are reversing the flow of 3 rivers that go into the Arctic. And experts fear that that act will drastically alter climatic conditions throughout Europe. And in Alaska, we're preparing to lay an 800-mile pipeline to pump hot oil from the North Slope south to Valdez over frozen tundra and permafrost. And ecologists are predicting an environmental disaster. The oil men are predicting large profits. And you know the best bet? Both will be right. The attack by our government on the pollution problem is the equivalent of trying to build the Aswan Dam with 3 beavers and a pack of bubble gum. Funds are always siphoned off to hundreds of other scientific ventures. You know, a national magazine recently reported that the government has funded a project to study the rectal temperature of sled dogs. Well, for crying out loud, who cares? Except another sled dog, the one behind. Now, only when you, the individual citizens, care enough to stop this insanity will it be stopped. Now, some of you have already written to your representatives, and the results show. You know, a multi-million-dollar government construction job was scrapped recently rather than disturb a California condor sanctuary. Now, that's marvelous, but can you imagine that happening even a few years ago? Not in your life. If you haven't written to your congressman or your governor, get busy, write him, and tell him that you want action, not words. No talk. A leaky sewer needs a cork, not a convention. A guy said the other day that government and industry are playing the pollution crisis like a big checker game. It's your move.
Welcome, sweet springtime, we greet thee in song. Murmurs of gladness fall on the ear. Voices long hushed, now their full notes prolong, echoing far and near. Sunshine now waves